everybody needs to understand when you look at these things, and the reason, we talked about before, when I got this information, why I didn't just put it on the internet, and people criticize me for this. They go, I didn't share enough information because the journalists are gatekeeping, right? They've got a big archive and they haven't published everything from it. And I told them not to publish everything from it.
Why did you do that? Why did you do that?
Because, again, it gets back to legitimate secrets and illegitimate secrets. Some spying, from my perspective, career spy, is okay, right?
Agreed.
If you have hacked a terrorist's phone, right, and you're getting some information about that, useful.
Agreed,
right?
Yeah.
If you're spying on a Russian general in charge of a, rocket division, useful, right? But there are lines and degrees in that where it's not useful. Now, the examples that I just gave you, these are targeted. This is where you're spying on an individual, their known named person that is being monitored for a specific reason that is related,
hopefully from a warrant.
Right. Well, even for foreign intelligence, in some indications, you don't need a warrant strictly. Although I think they should have warrants for all of these investigations because they established a court for precisely this reason called the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, right? And there's not a judge in the world who wouldn't stamp a warrant saying, hey, spy on Abu Jihad over here, right? And if you want to spy on another guy, Boris Badenov of the rocket division, right, that's okay. They're going to go with that. But then you look at these edge cases, and in the archive that I provided to journalists, there have been stories that have come out where they've spied on journalists, right? They've spied on human rights groups. And these kind of things, and there's not a judge in the world who wouldn't stamp a warrant saying, hey, spy on Abu Jihad over here, right? And if you want to spy on another guy, Boris Badenov of the rocket division, right, that's okay. They're going to go with that. But then you look at these edge cases, and in the archive that I provided to journalists, there have been stories that have come out where they've spied on journalists, right? They've spied on human rights groups. And these kind of things, I think people miss. I'm going to throw up some slides here, so forgive me if this gets weird and I put up the wrong ones. But since I came forward, this Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court that the government says authorized these programs 15 different times, was overruled by the first open courts to look at the program. These are federal courts here, right, that said, no, actually, these programs are unlawful. They're likely unconstitutional. When you start looking at the facts, you see, even within the context of the very loose restrictions and laws that apply to the NSA and surveillance, they say they broke their own laws, 2,776 times in a single year. And then you ask about that thing that motivates me, like why I came forward. We had been trying as a country before I came forward to prove the existence of these programs legally. Because this is our means of last sort of recourse in our system, right? We got the executive, we got the legislature, we got the judiciary, right? So Congress makes the laws, the executive is supposed to carry them out, the courts are supposed to play referee. The executive had broken the laws, Congress was turning a blind eye to the laws, and the courts were, and this is just months before I came forward, going, well, it does appear that the ACLU and Amnesty International, like all of these human rights groups and non-governmental organizations, had established that, these programs are likely unlawful. They likely exist. They're simply classified. But the government responded with this argument that you just saw, saying that, well, it's a state secret if they do exist. You, the plaintiffs, don't have hard, concrete evidence that they do exist. And the government is saying legally you have no right to discover evidence from the government, write documents, demand or demand an answer from the government as to whether whether or not these things exist, because the government's just going to give its standard, what they call GLOMAR response. We can neither confirm nor deny that these things exist, which leaves you out in the cold, which leaves the courts out in the cold. The courts go, look, the government could be breaking the law here. Look, they could be violating the Constitution here. But because you can't prove it, and because the government doesn't want to play ball, and the government says, if we were doing this, it would be legal and it would be necessary for national security or whatever, the court can't presume to know national security better than the executive because the courts aren't elected. And so this leads to this fundamentally broken system where, okay, the only way to have the courts review the legality of the programs is to establish the programs exist. But the programs are classified, so you can't establish they exist unless you have evidence. But providing that evidence to courts, to journalists, to anyone is a felony, right? That's punishable by 10 years per count under the Espionage Act. And the government has charged every source of public interest journalism who's really made a significant difference in these kind of cases since Daniel Ellsberg, really going back to that, under the same Espionage Act. It's always the same law. And there's no distinction to government between whether you've sold information to a foreign government for private benefit, right, or whether you provided information only to journalists for the public interest. And that's a fundamentally harmful thing, I think,